risk behavior instantly. Mobile surveillance units scan IDs and license plates.
You probably think that the law is a solid, unwavering protector of fairness, right? That the system, built to uphold justice, has mechanisms that prevent abuse. Well, brace yourself. You're wrong. Behind the scenes, there's a game being played, and it's one that leaves innocent people trapped in a web of legal loopholes. ICE, the agency responsible for enforcing U.S. immigration laws, doesn't just rely on force, it thrives on exploiting weaknesses in the law. Loopholes, ambiguities, and technicalities are not just incidental. They are the lifeblood of ICE's operations. It's chilling to consider that legal provisions, which were originally designed to protect, are now used to detain families, separate children from parents, and deport individuals without due process. Take a moment to let that sink in. Laws meant to safeguard rights are instead weaponized. The gap between legal theory and practice is where ICE operates, a system that allows the agency to sidestep basic human rights protections without facing consequences. But it's not just the agency that benefits. There's a wider system of compliance from politicians, law enforcement, and even local governments who intentionally or not let ICE manipulate these holes in the law. It's a dark reality that many don't see, and even fewer talk about. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time below. I'm curious to see where you're watching from. Now let's dig deeper into how ICE exploits this system. What exactly are these loopholes that allow ICE to operate with such impunity? It's time to break it down. You might be wondering, how does ICE get away with all of this? How can an agency sworn to uphold the law operate in the shadows, bending rules and manipulating the system? The answer lies in a series of legal loopholes, nuances in the law that allow them to detain people indefinitely, make arbitrary decisions, and bypass basic constitutional protections. These aren't just minor oversights. They are deliberate gaps in the legal framework that ICE uses to its advantage. And the most disturbing part? Many of these loopholes exist because they were never fully addressed in the first place. One of the most notorious loopholes is the use of expedited removal, which allows ICE to fast-track deportations without a hearing. The legal wording behind this provision is vague enough that ICE has used it to send people back to countries where they face extreme danger, all without the chance for a fair trial. This tactic disproportionately affects those who don't have legal representation or are unaware of their rights, leaving them vulnerable to swift and often unjust deportation. You didn't hear it here first, but ICE thrives on this vulnerability. Those who can't fight back get swept up in a system that's built to exclude them. Another legal gray area? The use of criminal convictions to justify detention. Even if someone was arrested years ago for a minor infraction, ICE can now claim that this makes them a priority. This approach allows ICE to justify the detention of individuals who have long been part of their communities, people who've rebuilt their lives only to be torn apart by an agency exploiting a minor legal detail. This manipulation of the law is by design, not by accident. And it's how ICE manages to continue its operations under a legal veil of legitimacy. The system is broken and the cracks are getting wider every day. But who's really to blame? Now, let's make this real. Meet Maria, a mother of two from Honduras, whose life was turned upside down by one of these very legal loopholes. Maria had been living in the United States for over a decade, building a life she could be proud of. She had a job, paid taxes, and sent her children to school. She had become part of the community. But one morning, everything changed. ICE agents showed up at her door, detaining her without explanation, and then sent her to a detention center hundreds of miles away from her children. The reason? A 20-year-old conviction for a minor offense, a conviction that was long since expunged from her record. But ICE didn't care. Under the expedited removal provision, they could arrest her without even giving her the chance to explain. For months, she sat in a detention facility, separated from her children, fighting a legal battle that seemed endless. Every lawyer who took on her case knew she faced an uphill climb because ICE had the legal backing to keep her detained, no matter how unjust the situation seemed. Maria's story is far from unique. Countless others have found themselves caught in a system where the rules are not about fairness, but about finding any way to justify detaining and deporting people. It's a harsh reality that many of us refuse to see because the faces are foreign and the stories are too hard to believe. But it's time to wake up to the fact that this isn't just happening to one person. This is happening every single day to mothers, fathers, children, and families all across the country. And it's all because of a legal loophole that allows ICE to operate with minimal oversight. The question you need to ask yourself, when we allow these things to happen, what does that say about us? The numbers behind ICE's use of these legal loopholes are staggering. According to data from Track Immigration, nearly 20% of those detained by ICE are held on questionable grounds, often with no clear criminal history to justify their detention. But what does this really mean? Let's break it down. In fiscal year 2024 alone, ICE made over 200,000 arrests, many of which involved individuals who were either long-term residents or had clean records. Around 30% of these arrests involved people who had no criminal charges, only minor infractions in their past. The numbers paint a disturbing picture of an agency that continues to focus on people who pose little to no threat to society. ICE doesn't just target the criminals. It's now a game of numbers, where even the most innocuous details are used to justify detention. Data from the Migration Policy Institute shows that a significant portion of people caught in ICE's net are those who never even had the opportunity to prove their innocence. People detained under expedited removal don't get the full process. They're simply removed, without a hearing, without a lawyer, and often without their families knowing where they've gone. One of the most disturbing statistics is that over 50% of those detained have no legal representation, leaving them unable to navigate the complicated and often contradictory legal landscape that ICE manipulates to its advantage. The facts don't lie. ICE is able to exploit these loopholes because the system is rigged in their favor. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Behind every statistic is a person, someone like Maria, whose life was torn apart. These are the human faces we should be asking about, not the abstract data. It's time to ask the difficult questions. Is ICE's exploitation of these legal loopholes justified? Are we okay with an agency that bends the law to suit its goals, even when those actions result in families being torn apart and lives being ruined? Supporters of ICE argue that these loopholes are necessary to ensure that individuals who are undocumented are deported swiftly and without legal interference. They say that these policies are essential to national security and maintaining order. But does security justify this kind of cruelty? On the other side, critics say that ICE's actions are a direct violation of human rights. They argue that the use of legal loopholes to bypass due process is nothing less than a form of institutionalized cruelty. In an ideal world, the law should protect the innocent until proven guilty, but ICE has turned that on its head. Instead of working within the system to ensure fair trials, ICE has weaponized ambiguity. By doing so, they erase the concept of justice entirely. The reality is that the system ICE uses is stacked against those who need it most, immigrants who are at the mercy of an agency that can use any minor infraction to justify their detention. But perhaps the most pressing question is whether we as a society are complicit. We may not be the ones holding the pen, but by allowing these practices to continue unchecked, are we enabling a system that punishes those least able to defend themselves? When we turn a blind eye to these injustices, we become part of the problem. Which side are you on? Are you willing to let this continue in the name of security, or will you take a stand for justice? The consequences of ICE's legal manipulation go far beyond the courtroom. When families are torn apart, the emotional and social repercussions ripple through entire communities. Maria's children, for example, spent months wondering where their mother had gone. They were left to navigate the school system without her, to explain to their friends and teachers why their mother had been taken away. The trauma of separation doesn't stop when the bars of the detention center close. It lingers, festering in the hearts of children who are forced to grow up without the stability of a parent. This isn't just about the legalities of immigration. It's about real people suffering from decisions made behind closed doors. And it's not just Maria's family. Across the United States, hundreds of thousands of families are caught in the same vicious cycle. Parents are sent to detention centers, often without warning, and their children are left behind, unsure of what the future holds. For many, the impact of these separations is lifelong. Studies show that children who experience the trauma of family separation are at higher risk for depression, anxiety, and long-term emotional and psychological damage. And this trauma is compounded by the uncertainty of it all. For the families of detainees, the waiting is often unbearable. Some wait for months, not knowing if they'll ever see their loved ones again. The emotional toll on both the detainees and their families is immeasurable. Yet ICE continues to exploit these legal loopholes, knowing that it can remove people without the proper legal safeguards or considerations for their families. This is the human cost of ICE's unchecked power, and we can't continue to ignore it. Now we need to take a step back and think about the bigger picture. What does it say about our society when we allow ICE to manipulate the law in this way? When we turn a blind eye to the suffering of families and the violations of basic human rights, we are complicit in the system. The ethical question here is stark. Are we willing to accept this in the name of security? Are we okay with the idea that, for the sake of enforcing immigration laws, families should be broken apart and lives should be ruined? This isn't a question of us versus them or even one of immigration policy. It's a question of human dignity. At what point do we decide that the laws of the land should serve the people, not punish them? The United States prides itself on being a nation of laws, but the truth is that those laws have been warped to allow for systematic harm. The logic that drives ICE's actions isn't about justice. It's about control and power. It's about using legal loopholes to continue an agenda that dehumanizes entire groups of people. We like to think of ourselves as a compassionate society, but these loopholes show us something else. When we let them persist, we are condoning actions that strip away the very values we claim to hold dear. This isn't just about fixing one bad policy. This is about confronting a system that has been built on injustice and standing up for those who are too often silenced. So what does it say about us when we turn away from this? The question isn't just about whether ICE is ethical. It's about whether we, as a society, are. The time for indifference is over. The system that allows ICE to exploit these legal loopholes and tear families apart is not some abstract issue that only affects others. It is a crisis of human rights, and it is happening right here in our communities every single day. What's more, we have the power to stop it. The first step toward ending this exploitation is to acknowledge it. We can no longer hide behind the excuse that we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. The data is clear, the stories are real, and the human cost is staggering. But acknowledgement alone isn't enough. It's time for action. We need to demand that our representatives stand up against ICE's unchecked power and work to close these legal loopholes. Contacting your local lawmakers, signing petitions, and supporting organizations that advocate for immigrant rights. These are the small but significant steps we can take to begin undoing the damage that has been done. Every person who takes action is a step closer to creating a society that values human dignity over political expediency. And if you can, start a conversation. Share the stories. Share Maria's story and the stories of the countless others who have been caught in ICE's legal web. These voices need to be heard, and you are the one who can amplify them. The more we talk about this, the more we open up the path to change. This isn't just about immigration policy. This is about justice, compassion, and doing what's right. So take a moment, share this video, and make a commitment to stand against the exploitation of legal loopholes. This fight isn't over, but with enough voices, it can be won.